Hello, gorgeous, and welcome to the Midlife Realignment. I'm your host, Esther Blum, and I'm here to disrupt the narrative on perimenopause and menopause with humor, nutrition, hormones, and fierce self-advocacy. Together, we'll rewrite your story and the rules because there's a light at the end of the vaginal tunnel. Let's go. Welcome back to the Midlife Realignment podcast. And today's guest requires no introduction because, spoiler alert, it's me. And I wanted to pop on and do a one-to-one podcast with you because we're going to spend time unpacking hormones. And I want this to be a resource that you can share with your friends, your family, your sisters, your doctors, whenever anybody says hormones are risky, hormones cause cancer, hormones are dangerous. I don't know when I'm supposed to take them, why I'm supposed to take them. We're going to really start unpacking all of that. And I want you to also know that you can submit questions to me directly at estherblum.com/podcast. Fill out the Q&A form because I will be doing solo episodes about every 4 to 6 weeks, and I will aggregate your questions and I will answer them and hopefully answer many of these questions within this podcast already, and we'll get you off to a running start. So this is such an exciting week, such a landmark, historical moment in the world of hormones, because this week, as I record this, the FDA finally removed the black box warning on vaginal estrogen. Vaginal estrogen is so ridiculously safe. It is such a tiny microdose of estrogen that stays localized in the vaginal canal. And it is so safe that women on chemotherapy can use vaginal estrogen. Women postpartum can use vaginal estrogen. If you put in vaginal estrogen and then have sex, you won't even transfer it to your partner. It is so safe and so low dose. And we're going to just keep on fighting this battle and get the other black box warning labels removed, off estrogen patches, off oral progesterone, which is bioidentical progesterone. And that is because those hormones still have the same warning labels as birth control pills. So if you pick up your bioidentical estrogen patch, it has warning labels for oral synthetic estrogen. And your pharmacist will tell you these are going to cause cancer. If you start filling a prescription for oral progesterone, which is oral micronized progesterone, that's FDA approved, that you get through your pharmacy, you will see the black box warning label for synthetic oral progestins. So you're basically getting birth control warning labels in your hormones. These need to go. So grab a pen and paper, grab a cup of hot something delicious, and sit back and enjoy, because today we're going to spend a lot of time educating you on hormones. Because when women learn, we don't just help ourselves. We help our friends, we help our sisters, our daughters, our nieces, and we become menopause ambassadors. And if we sit and wait for medicine to catch up, we're going to already lose another generation of women not having access to these things. And decades of women have been deprived. So our mothers were all deprived or pulled off hormones unless they worked with a really amazing provider. And we deserve so much better. There are already thousands of research studies proving the safety and efficacy of bioidentical hormones. So let's talk about the basics, what hormones do in the body and why the old studies scared the crap out of people and how we actually need to think about them. Let's just roll back the clock and go through a bit of history first. So back in the 70s, there were some amazing doctors, Jonathan Wright and Alan Gaby. They were some of my first mentors in the field of hormones. And they were already putting women on bioidentical hormones. There was even an episode of All in the Family where Edith Bunker was told by her daughter-in-law, Gloria, "Ma, get on your hormones. They're natural. They'll help you." And this was mainstream conversation in the 70s. And then this freaking Women's Health Initiative study came out in 2002. It was a very poorly designed study. The women in it were already 10 plus years post-menopause, and they had high cholesterol, they had increased cardiovascular risk, they had poor metabolic health. And at that point, your body's already gone through an endocrine storm and your hormones have declined and your organs have already been affected. So you're in a higher risk state. They weren't put on hormones, the 2 years prior to menopause when you have the most beneficial effect and the 10 years post-menopause when you have the most protective effect. So these women were given oral synthetic estrogen and progestins. And when you take oral hormones, like estrogen in particular, has to pass through the liver, which is very hard on the body. And the estrogens don't always go down the right pathways. Some of them go down very pro-inflammatory pathways. So that's already stressful on the body. We know that there is an increased risk of clot and stroke with oral synthetic estrogens. And the progestins they used were not the same as natural bioidentical progesterone. So no surprise here, the results were problematic. And by the way, the interpretation of the results were also particularly problematic. So the study scared an entire generation of doctors and women away from hormones. But the problem wasn't the concept of hormones, it was the way the study was done. The way the data ended up being interpreted on the Women's Health Initiative study is that the supposed increased risk of clot and stroke went from 0 to about 6 in 10,000 people, which is still not a statistically significant number at all. And funnily enough, I'll talk about this in a bit, even in spite of there being synthetic hormones used in the study design, there were still protective effects in the body from the estrogens. So, and there have been studies looked at where even estrogen only was used, not even synthetic progestins, and those still had benefits. So it's a very mixed result study, but at the end of the day, the scare tactics, I remember it was Meredith Vieira on the Today Show was reporting and talking about how dangerous these hormones were and hormone replacement, and women had to stop. And I remember too, at the time I was working with a functional medicine doctor and I called my mom. She had had a hysterectomy at age 49. And I said, you gotta stop taking this. And she was only on estrogen only. I said, you gotta stop taking this. And later on in life, she had severe genitourinary symptoms of menopause. And to this day, I have not forgiven myself for that because we can prevent so much. We know better now, so we can do better now. So here's what you need to know about how hormones impact the body. Hormones affect every organ system. This is why when you go through perimenopause, it's such a hormone storm because first of all, it affects us from the top down. In the brain, estrogen and progesterone and testosterone play really important roles in memory, in cognition, in mood. And so without them, the brain literally cannot fire on all cylinders. We're lying in a ball, depressed as all fuck. And then we're also enraged because our progesterone is so low. We don't have the calming neurotransmitters that they make. And we also get a lot of brain fog where we walk into rooms and forget why we came in. So all of a sudden, we feel like we're losing our mind, and it's not your fault. Next down, our hormones affect our thyroid. Now, the thyroid is so rich in estrogen receptors. We don't even realize that. And when our estrogen drops, thyroid function can really be impacted. Okay. What else impacts a thyroid? Trauma. So whether it's trauma with a small t or a capital T, the thyroid and the throat chakra really manifest that stress physically, and especially in midlife. Women who are in midlife have a much higher rate of thyroid issues and autoimmune conditions as a result, because both are triggered by trauma, but both can be triggered by low estrogen as well. It plays a tremendous effect on our autoimmune, or on our immune system, I should say. Cardiovascular effect. This to me is one of the greatest benefits of hormones. And without optimal hormones, we start laying down plaque in our arteries. So all of a sudden, our cholesterol and triglycerides often spike in menopause. It's not just diet, it's hormones. Cholesterol is also going to go up in menopause, perimenopause, I should say, as a protective effect. Why is this? Because cholesterol is a precursor to hormones. So your body is going to notice, hey, the ovaries aren't making so much progesterone or estrogen or testosterone anymore. So what am I going to do? I'm going to help you put on extra body fat and produce more cholesterol in the liver to help eke out more hormones during this transitional state. So what we do is often when I put my clients, when I refer them to providers to prescribe hormones, cholesterol does decrease. Some women do find when they take hormones that their cholesterol does increase. And again, I believe this is a protective mechanism. We have to remember that cholesterol used to be 200 plus our age because we want it to make sex hormones. We want to have libidos. We want to have happy brains. Cholesterol and fatty acids coat all of our nerves in our brain and our spinal cords. And when I worked in the cardiac units in the hospital, I would look at the labs before and after heart attacks. Cholesterol inevitably would drop after someone had a heart attack because it would rush to the site of injury to repair it. So we have to remember cholesterol can be healing. It doesn't mean you're going to develop heart disease. That's where, you want to look at ratios of cholesterol. You want to look at your insulin and inflammatory markers, and I'll get into that in a bit. Hormones also do impact our metabolism because when estrogen drops, our cells become more resistant to insulin. And I'll throw in testosterone with this too. So when we have higher insulin, we're going to store more body fat, especially around the midsection. We're going to have more inflammation. Cortisol can also step in and contribute to that. So when we put on more body fat, we pump out more cortisol, and we keep pumping out more cortisol, and then we keep putting on more body fat. So it becomes very cyclical, and that's why it's so hard to lose that midsection gut when you're in perimenopause. And it can be done. It absolutely can be done. I've seen it happen over and over and over again for almost 3 decades. But knowing this, knowledge is power, and that can make a big impact. And genitourinary system, 80 to 100% of women during perimenopause, and especially menopause, have an absolute impact on the genitourinary system. We have loss of bladder control. And if you never got this under control post-childbirth, you will definitely see it ramp up now. A weaker pelvic floor, vaginal dryness, atrophy. So this is so crazy, guys. But I call this the case of the disappearing vagina because without optimal estrogen applied to the vaginal tissues, your labia minora, those are the inner folds, they can shrink up in size and you reduce your pleasure during intercourse because that's where there's a lot of nerve endings there. Okay, and your clitoris can shrink to your urethra, which makes it very easy for UTIs to keep coming. Okay, and these are all connected to declining estrogen and progesterone. Now, with the black box warning label being removed for vaginal estrogen, my hope now is that women in nursing homes, in diapers with Alzheimer's, who are getting all these UTIs, who are getting septic, who are dying, all of these women can now get access to it as a treatment. And we know there is a wonderful study out there that shows a decrease in all-cause mortality from HRT, and it can expand your lifespan by 1 to 2 years. And you may think, 1 to 2 years, big deal. But you know what? To your family members and your loved ones who would kill to have more time with their loved ones, like 1 to 2 years is every year is a gift when, you have a lot of love in your life and you have people who want you to be around. And by the way, you may want to be around too. So that can all make a difference. So all of this is why women feel like their whole body changes, because it does. Every system is impacted. Rachel Godfrey and I call it hormonal fuckery, if you heard that podcast. But it really makes a huge impact. So it's not in your head and you're not crazy. And if your doctor dismisses you, please, you could school your doctor at this point. So I'll give you a story. This is a very interesting story about the impact of hormones and thyroid. So a dear friend of mine was married to a man. She had 3 kids, and her husband cheated on her. And she had been carrying resentment towards him for years and years. He was lying. He wasn't paying bills. He was literally shoving them under the seat of his car and just letting them pile on. And she carried a ton of resentment, and stayed in the marriage and really never spoke her truth. And eventually she developed thyroid cancer and had to have her thyroid removed. And of course she did, because the thyroid's lodged in that throat chakra and the body keeps the score with all of this trauma. So she had her thyroid out. She was, followed all the protocols. She now takes thyroid medication and feels amazing. And after the surgery, she got divorced. She went back to work. She had a really good therapist, and the therapist was like, you've been training your whole whole life for this. So she's an incredible therapist. And she found a new partner and has completely rebuilt her life. She moved to a different state and she's radiantly healthy and happy. And I see this again and again, how trauma and then keeping that trauma silent and midlife changes collide. And it is really our call to action. This is the phoenix rising. This is the time when we are truly at a reckoning and understanding who we are. We are getting collectively louder. This is another fun fact. When your estrogen levels fall, so does your filter. So you may notice now, your bullshit meter is spot on. It's very clear. If it's not a hell yes, it is a fuck no for people, for opportunities, for whatever it is that you decide. And you are no longer tolerating what you used to tolerate, being the good girl all the time, saying yes to things you wanted to say no to. Now is your time to let no be your multivitamin, as Dr. Will Cole says. Let no be your multivitamin, but also really speak up and speak out and speak your truth so that you're not resentful, you're not quiet, you're not pleasing people, which you're looking at a professional people pleaser. I mean, I followed my mother's example of being a people pleaser, of being a perfectionist. And now I'm like, it's good enough. Don't let perfect be the enemy of done. So what? Who cares if things are not perfect? But our bodies are remarkably resilient and can heal themselves naturally when given the right tools to do so. And working on trauma and really thinking about what is best and highest and most aligned with you will really heal you when you're in alignment with that. This is where you're going to want to really get a pen and paper and write down what I'm about to tell you. So we're going to talk about thyroid and testing that you can do in perimenopause. A lot of providers do not want to test in perimenopause because your hormones are a roller coaster, but I'm telling you, just start with a baseline, okay? Because you will compare your test results down the line. Let's talk about thyroid testing. Standard doctors usually do TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, and then they send you on your merry way. That is 1/7 of the puzzle, okay, and of the full picture. So you also need to get the following thyroid tests. You need free free T3, free T4, reverse T3, thyroid antibodies, and ferritin, which is the storage form of iron, to see the whole picture. And I am no expert on thyroid medicine. That is an art and a science, and there are plenty of great experts out there on them, like McCall McPherson. She's a fierce force in the thyroid space. But just like hormones, okay, women can have thyroid labs in the so-called normal ranges, but still not feel well. And that's why deeper testing matters. And diet is so important too, because carbohydrates, for example, help T4 to convert to T3, which is the active form of thyroid hormone. So I see women coming to me on keto or carnivore diets or just under eating their calories, period. And their thyroid's really sluggish and they're really exhausted and their estrogen's dropping, which is not stoking the thyroid metabolic fire. So they're just dying on the vine. They're exhausted all the time. And when I diet women up, because I do diet women up, most women are not eating enough. Believe it or not, they're not overeating. They're not eating enough. When I diet them up, they say, my clients ask, well, where do I start? I say, start with carbs. If you're not losing weight and you're sluggish and your cortisol is rock bottom, start introducing carbs 3 times a day. You know, having fruit with breakfast, having some chickpeas or lentils or rice or potato at lunch, and also again at dinner. And that can make a huge difference. People are like, I can't believe I'm eating carbs, but I'm actually losing weight. And that is because you're actually putting gas in your tank and fueling your body. All right, so let's move on to hormones and hormone testing and the whole ethos around perimenopause and menopause. I hear this every day. The most fascinating thing is, with all the time I've spent writing books and on my Instagram channel educating women on hormones and showing research studies, I constantly get DMs saying hormones are dangerous. Somebody yesterday said, don't even listen to the FDA, like after the black box warning labels were removed. You know, she said, the FDA is still dangerous. I would never trust them. And I'm like, well, you should trust them because that's how you get insurance covered hormones. Number one. Number two, when people say hormones are dangerous, you know, I'll continue to unpack this, but the levels of hormones that you are exposed to in hormone replenishment therapy or hormone replacement therapy are microdoses. So number 3, again, research. This is not personal bias. This is me reading the research and having a practice and seeing the reality of the changes in women's quality of life and seeing the changes in the beneficial changes in their inflammatory markers dropping, their cholesterol dropping, their insulin dropping, and their weight dropping, and getting back their clarity, mental clarity, happier mood, quality of life, sleep, libido, all of these things. I also see women, what's really exciting is when I see them get on hormones, get their diets dialed in, I see tremendously deep transformations. You know, I have a client who is a very high level executive. She's a partner at a huge financial firm in New York City. She was like, you know what? It's time for me to say no to that everyone else's needs and say yes to myself. And she's planning her exit strategy. So it's not only a physical transformation, but it's an emotional transformation of really stepping into your power. And, you know, when anyone tells you menopause is natural, just deal with it. Like, I'm calling BS. Yes, it's natural. Yes, it is. But so is gasoline. I wouldn't tell you to drink gasoline, right? So menopause may be natural, but it doesn't mean that we have to shrivel up into, you know, these shrinking violets in a corner of a room somewhere. I will also always hear the argument, this doesn't happen to indigenous cultures. So again, indigenous cultures are not exposed to the mass amount of chemicals on a day-to-day basis that we are in our food, in our cleaning products, in our environment, taking commercial flights, in our clothing, our workout gear is full of plastics. So yes, that's very true. Indigenous cultures probably don't have the symptoms in the hot flash. I know Chinese women have far less hot flashes that may have to do with the small amounts of fermented soy they're eating. But again, it's diet, it's lifestyle, and we are under extraordinary stress here in the US. I mean, you have your smartphones on 24/7 and you have a news cycle clobbering you over the head 24/7. So we have evidence to support the benefits, and that's where I'm going because I'm a big proponent of quality of life. So hormones keep the brain sharp, right? They're going to protect the heart. They stabilize your metabolism and help prevent all the middle-age weight gain. They preserve bone density. They protect the vagina, the bladder, and the pelvic floor. And without them, women suffer unnecessarily. And again, as I've mentioned, the research shows they're safe and effective. So let's unpack heart disease and risk on this. And I'm going to answer some questions throughout. Okay, so a question I got is, I was told that because my father has coronary artery disease, I may not be able to use HRT due to the risk of heart disease. Is that true? So anecdotally, I've only had one client who couldn't use HRT. Her doctor would not prescribe it. She was more than 10 years postmenopause. She had a lot of inflammation. She was very overweight. She was drinking a lot. She had a fatty liver. She had very poor cardiovascular markers. For most women, however, hormones protect the heart, and most women are able to go on HRT even later in life. But again, pen and paper here, so write these down. If you are over 10 years from menopause, or even in perimenopause, and you want to get tested, now's the time to get a cardiac workup. So to get a clear picture, you can go to a cardiologist. You can get, number one, a calcium score. You can get a carotid Doppler. These are ultrasounds of the arteries to detect plaque buildup and narrowing of the arteries. You could possibly get a stress test as well. But these will give you a cardiac baseline workup. And then you can talk to your cardiologist and say, I want to go on hormones. Can you clear me for HRT? That's always just a great starting point. And if you're nervous that you can't go on HRT because of cardiac risk, then you'll have peace of mind. But truly, early intervention is going to be so much more important. It's the same with cancer risk. Just because you have a family history of cancer risk doesn't mean that you can't take hormones. I rarely see women, even with family risk, who cannot take hormones. And the hormones are, estrogen in particular, it has a 60% reduction risk in cancer for women who are taking HRT. We have it the opposite. Everyone blames hormones for cancer. But why are we blaming hormones that have been in our bodies our entire lives? Number one. Number two, why are doctors prescribing the pill for women for 30 years at a time, which have all synthetic forms of hormones, right? And those synthetic progestins that were given in the Women's Health Initiative study, I have read so much research showing that the synthetic progestins are linked to a higher incidence of cancer. Alcohol is a class 1 carcinogen. That is linked to a very high incidence of cancer. So we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, and we don't want to just make blanket statements like hormones are dangerous or you can't take hormones because X, Y, and Z. Even if you have factor V Leiden or a clotting disorder, you can still take hormones. You just want to take precautions when you're flying. You want to wear compression socks. You want to get up and walk around so you don't get a DVT or a blood clot. But you can, again, clear it with your doctor. But the risk factors with factor V and clotting were greater with oral synthetic hormones. When you're using topical estrogen, topical testosterone, there's virtually no risk of clotting. That has been debunked in the research. Okay. So if you're still in perimenopause, it is best to start. We lose the most amount of bone and muscle in the 2 years prior to full-blown menopause. And we don't know when we're going to reach full-blown menopause. We don't each have a timeline ticking or an app that says, okay, on January 27th, you're going to be in menopause. We have no way of knowing. So that's why early intervention matters. And by the way, it makes the menopausal transition far better. I think I would have jumped out a window if I did not have hormone support in perimenopause. And I still had a very difficult perimenopause. Without the hormones, it would have been 10 times worse. So early intervention also, again, I'm going to repeat this again. It offsets a lot of inflammation and cardiovascular risk before it sets in. And I will say this too, it really does offset weight gain. If you are an active person and you are optimizing your macros, hormones are not the whole pie, but they're a significant piece of the pie in maintaining your body weight. So that's not even an issue. So this is the opposite of what many doctors tell their patients. I had a client, I made a reel on this that just went so crazy viral because I had a client whose doctor told her that she could only use the pill in perimenopause and she had to wait until she was in full-blown menopause to start HRT. Okay, this doesn't even make that make sense to me. Putting women on the pill in perimenopause suppresses ovulation and it suppresses progesterone, which is already the first hormone to drop, okay? So without progesterone to balance estrogen, you get brain fog, you get crime scene periods, you get anxiety. And by the way, you get something called insomnia, which really, really sucks. So the pill masks symptoms. It doesn't protect your brain, doesn't protect your bones or your uterus or your heart the way bioidentical HRT does. Now, I know I'm going to get a lot of heat sent my way on this because some women swear by it. They have tried HRT. They feel horrible going off the pill. They feel much more regulated going off, staying on the pill and not on HRT. Boo, if that works for you, who am I to say no? You are your own best doctor. You know your body best. But if you are on the pill and you are in perimenopause, you can always add in oral bioidentical progesterone. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not going to increase your risk of pregnancy. The pill will still control your risk of getting pregnant. And eventually, and the same goes for if you're on an IUD, you can still add in bioidentical progesterone so you get the mood benefits and you get the sleep benefits. And then when you are in menopause, you can pull off the pill, or let the pill fall away. You can take out your IUD. You don't keep them in forever. And the pill should never be used as hormone replacement. That is not what it is indicated for. So as I've mentioned 10 times now, the pill is synthetic estrogen and synthetic progesterone. Bioidentical hormones use estradiol. This is identical to what your body makes. And if you're using, so an estrogen patch is estradiol. If you're using Bi-Est cream, that's estradiol and estriol, whereas the pill is estrone, which is not a beneficial form of estrogen, right? And bioidentical progesterone, not synthetic progestins, that is replenishing what you've lost. It protects your organs and it will improve your quality of life. So when doctors suggest the pill for perimenopause, that's not hormone literacy. Blah. When doctors suggest the pill for perimenopause, that's not hormone literacy. That's old school Band-Aid medicine. And really, it's the early intervention with bioidentical hormones that improve longevity. So here's the quick cheat sheet for bioidentical hormone replenishment. Testosterone, you're going to want that for drive, sexual drive, just drive to get your ass out of bed, your energy, your motivation. It supports with lean muscle and it supports libido. You can use testosterone topically. You can use it vaginally. However, you are going to need it compounded from a compounding pharmacy. Right now, testosterone is not FDA approved for women, which is annoying as balls. If you want to get it covered by insurance, then what you can do is ask to get the men's version, which basically comes in a catch-up packet, comes in packet doses starting at 10 milligrams. Most women are on 1 milligram, 3 milligrams, maybe 5 milligrams topically. So what you will need to do is you will need to ask your pharmacist, say, hey, can you sell me some plastic syringes, and you can get these teeny tiny funnels, right? And you can pour the testosterone into the syringe and then measure out just the, 1 milliliter or whatever your dosing is. You'll have to work with the pharmacist and say, how much of this do I use if this is my dosing? But you can get it covered under insurance as what is called an off-label use. Right now, testosterone is approved for women for, of course, low libido because the patriarchy. I'm just going to go and say it, right? It's not prescribed because women are depressed or losing their minds or having no energy to get their ass out of bed and go to the gym. But really, medications are prescribed off-label all the time. Doctors who tell you to take birth control pill all month long so you never have a cycle, that is an off-label use. Or if you're taking an H2 blocker like Prilosec or Prevacid, and you're taking it for more than 6 weeks, that's an off-label use, okay? So you're not doing anything wrong. You're not doing anything illegal, or, you're not going to be banned if you decide to join the Olympics. That's not going to happen, okay? Estrogen. Estrogen helps with brain sharpness, our sleep, right? Progesterone helps you fall asleep, but estrogen helps you stay asleep. Most people don't realize that. Part of estrogen's mechanism is thermostat regulation. So it prevents hot flashes. So you're not waking up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, having to change your clothes, change your sheets, right? And it really protects the arteries. If you want to read more on this, Dr. Pam Smith is brilliant and writes all about this in her books. And it prevents dementia. Think about what happens with Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's takes 20 years to start showing up. From the time it starts, there is a 20-year progression. Most women, 2/3 of Alzheimer's patients are women. They develop it starting in their 70s. Well, what happens 20 years prior? Menopause. You see where I'm going with this? Think about this, ladies, and men too, if you're listening. Think about this. We can empty out nursing homes with microdoses of HRT. And I say microdoses because HRT is 1/5 of the dose of a birth control pill. So think about this, right? We all get just a swipe of testosterone cream every day, an estrogen patch or some Biest cream, and then a progesterone pill at night, and then vaginal estrogen 2 to 3 times a week. That is it. That's the protocol for keeping your brain, for keeping your heart, for keeping your mood, for sleeping, for happy, healthy relationships, productivity at work. The workspace is losing forgive me, I don't remember the stats exactly. It's easily $1 or $2 billion a year in lost wages due to menopausal symptoms. We could change the world with just some hormones. And no, I don't get any money from this, in case you all think I'm in bed with Big Pharma. I'm a dietitian. I'm not. I don't get endorsements. I don't prescribe hormones. So no, there is zero kickback or incentive for me other than changing your life, seeing you happy, and spreading the word to your posse. That's the goal, is making you all menopause ambassadors. Okay, so back to progesterone again. Progesterone is the opposition to estrogen. So estrogen's like the tiger out of the cage, right? That's when we get our menorage and our anger and irritability. Progesterone is like the kitten. It's very calming, reduces anxiety, it supports sleep, it prevents those crime scene periods. So this is a true story. I had a client who was a very high-powered executive attorney, and I'm not even kidding you. When she had her cycle, she would have such a heavy flow that she would pool blood in her shoes. Can you imagine, like, you're at work and there's just blood running down your legs? It's like a scene from Carrie. So anyway, I got her and her doctor to bump her up to 300 to 400 milligrams of progesterone during those crime scene days, and it completely controlled it. It stopped that crazy crime scene periods and clots. So again, all of these are really useful tools during the menopausal transition. And you all know I'm very transparent about the fact that I'm on very high dose progesterone. You can go up to, 800 to 1,000 if you need it for sleep. I'm currently on 450 milligrams for sleep of a sustained release progesterone. So I'll talk more about that in a bit. But you can really go very high doses. It's very safe. It's very effective, and it protects the uterine lining. Now, what if you've had a hysterectomy? Most doctors will say, oh, no, you only need estrogen. You don't have a uterus, so you don't need progesterone. That is absolutely not true. You have progesterone receptors on every cell in your body, and progesterone helps so much with mood and with sleep and anxiety and GABA production. So you do need progesterone, even if you don't have a uterus. I don't have a uterus anymore. You see me rocking out the progesterone because I don't sleep without it. Okay? And then vaginal estrogen to prevent all those genitourinary symptoms of menopause. If your libido is incredibly low and you're on all these hormones, you're exposed to these hormones. If your libido is still low, you can have vaginal estrogen compounded. Now, vaginal estrogen is FDA approved. You can get it in a cream as estrace. But if you want to boost your libido, you can have your compounding pharmacy make vaginal estrogen and add in testosterone. Or if you can't take vaginal estrogen, you don't tolerate it, you can use vaginal DHEA from a compounding pharmacy. Okay, all of these are really helpful in getting your libido back up. All right, so here's my personal cheat sheet. Okay, if you're crying at everything, you probably have too much estrogen going on. May not need estrogen yet. If you want to kill someone, you may have too much testosterone, or you may have a progesterone deficiency. If you have anxiety and insomnia, you don't have enough progesterone and you need to add those in. So if your doctor won't test you, you can also go by your signs and symptoms. What happens when you're on hormones? What about site rotation? And what about what are called hormone holidays? So once you're post-menopause, what happens to your body? A couple of really cool things. Your ovaries shut down hormone production. They've wound down the party. The piñata's emptied out, right? And what happens is energetically and creatively, all that feminine energy, that sacral power moves from your pelvic region up to your heart and your brain. So you truly reignite. Your spirituality, your personal power, your creativity. It all comes back, even if you feel like you're very lost during the perimenopausal stages. Dr. Lisa Mosconi writes all about the menopause brain and the incredible shifts we have as women. But at this point in menopause, you're only eking out tiny amounts of hormones from your adrenal glands. So you really do need daily replenishment. So you want to make sure that you're rotating your application sites, number one. So testosterone and estrogen gels or creams can go on your lower abdomen. They can go on your inner arms. They can go behind the knees. They can go in your inner thighs, okay? But don't put them on the same place every day. You've got to rotate your sites so your receptor sites don't get, stagnant, kind of clogged up. It's like a diabetic. You're going to rotate your sites to give yourself insulin too for very different reasons. But you want to make sure that you're rotating your sites, plain and simple. If you're using an estrogen patch, rotate between the left and the right hips. You want to keep rubbing alcohol handy because the glue leaves a nice ring. Like it looks like if I have gone a while without cleaning off all the residue, it looks like an octopus has suctioned my hips basically. But you rotate, one application the right side, one the left side. And the hormones, the estrogen patch, you can rotate, you change them out every 3 to 4 days. So I'll change mine on a Monday and a Thursday. Some people like Tuesday, Friday, whatever works for you. Just put a note in your phone, a reminder, so you don't forget. Okay. And if you're applying topical estrogen cream and topical testosterone cream, you can apply them the same time, just not on the same sites. So try to remember to rotate. You don't want to put multiple hormones on the same spot. You want to, if you're putting on biased cream, on your arms, put your testosterone in your inner thighs and then rotate. Okay. Some women love to take a hormone holiday. You take a 1 day a week off. This is really individual. You don't have to. It's not mandatory. Some people like to. I know for me personally, if I don't use my progesterone, I don't sleep. And if I don't use my testosterone, I am tired. I need a nap on the days I don't take it. So, it's really individual preference. And to me, there's no problem if you don't take a day off, especially in menopause. It's nice to have your body in a very steady state, but it's good to know your options. Let's spend a minute talking about my girl, vaginal estrogen. It's ridiculously safe for everyone, as I've mentioned. Cancer patients using chemo can take it, can be used for dryness. If you're having painful sex, if you're having UTIs, pelvic floor issues, if you're constipated because your pelvic floor is weak too, that can help. But if you are having pelvic floor issues, vaginal estrogen alone may not do it for you. It may not be the trick. You may need to also go for pelvic floor therapy, which is just such a fantastic gift. I call mine my magician. She's changed my life. And if you're getting a lot of hemorrhoids because you're very constipated all the time, go to a pelvic floor therapist. Learn how to breathe properly so you're not straining and pushing. But vaginal estrogen should be applied to the vestibule, the inner canal, and also all the inner folds and the clitoris and the urethra. So you can use an applicator or you can use your hands, whichever most women finds easy. You just put a pea-sized amount on your finger, you insert it, swipe all around, and do it 2 to 3 nights a week. And this protects the vaginal microbiome. So if you're getting all these yeast infections, also use vaginal estrogen. And honestly, women should be offered it postpartum. I remember after my son was born, my bestie said to me, sex is going to hurt for a good year after. I never even heard of a pelvic floor therapist. And I realized in hindsight, wow, what a disservice that was. I should have had that. And my doula didn't even tell me about it. I should have been offered, vaginal estrogen and pelvic floor therapy. And all the women, all of my friends were leaking, peeing their pants. I was like, what is going on here? Why are Depends and Poise pads now geared towards women in their 40s? And by the way, it's never too late to fix your pelvic floor. Never. Can be fixed at any point in time. So go get that shit now. And here's another fun fact. You can also put vaginal estrogen on your face too. I use a pea-sized amount under my moisturizer. It soaks in beautifully and it really helps rebuild collagen because that's what it's doing to the vaginal walls. It rebuilds collagen and restores lubrication. So my face is not self-lubricating, but definitely I'm going to work at the collagen as much as I can. All right. So let's circle back to blood work again, because this is where you're going to really get empowered in perimenopause and menopause. And as I mentioned earlier, Most doctors are running minimal testing and women are told everything is fine when I know you're feeling craptastic. So we really want a complete picture. And, simple things can make a big difference. Something simple as your blood sugar contributing to your Alzheimer's risk. So we want to look at your blood sugar. Why is this? Because when your blood sugar is out of balance, it drives a tremendous amount of inflammation and weight gain and brain changes. And I know with your declining hormones, you do get sugar cravings. So we want to make sure that your sugar is really tight in perimenopause and menopause, because Alzheimer's, it's also called type 3 diabetes, which is caused by a process called glycation. That's where sugar molecules stick to our brain cells. Symptoms of Alzheimer's often don't show until 20 years after the process has begun, and the loss of gray matter in the brain starts during perimenopause. So prevention and longevity really is derived from hormones and blood sugar control. So here's the key labs you want to request. Number one is a hemoglobin A1C. This is the average for your blood sugar for over 3 months. Number two, fasting insulin. This is most overlooked, but really critical. And the third is glucose. You want to get these tests done. Next is your cardiovascular risk, because a standard lipid panel doesn't tell the full story. We really need inflammatory markers to paint the full picture. So you want to request something called apolipoprotein B, C-reactive protein, homocysteine, lipoprotein a, and a full lipid panel with cholesterol ratios. If you are driving and listening to this and are not writing this down, this is all listed in my book, See You Later, Ovulator. So it's all in chapter 2 on testing, and I break down and explain the tests for each one. Okay, you're also going to want to look at magnesium, B12, vitamin D, and zinc. These are very, very important nutrients for 1,000 reasons, okay? And yes, it's going to feel like a vampire visit at your blood draw with just multiple vials of blood, but it's covered by insurance and it's worth it. And if your doctor won't do it, you can say, I will pay for this out of pocket. I'll sign a waiver. This is what I want done. I want a comprehensive functional medicine panel. That's what it is. And if your doctor still won't do it, just find a new doctor, because many will. So hormone panels, okay? Even if you're menopausal, you still want baseline numbers of hormones. So you want to request your estradiol, your progesterone, your total testosterone and free testosterone, your DHEA sulfate, your pregnenolone, FSH, and LH. So why would you want these if you're menopausal? Because if you're on hormones, you're going to want to know if you are on an optimal amount of hormones to support bone density, to support energy. Now, some doctors say, I'm not going to test your blood levels of hormones. I'm going to go by your symptoms. That's okay if you're starting HRT, but you should still know if your levels are high enough once you have started. And if you're already in menopause, FSH and LH aren't as important. They just kind of confirm that you're in menopause. So what happens, though, if your hormones are fluctuating daily, which they are? How do we know that the snapshot is accurate? So if your cycles are still regular, and yes, you can still have regular cycles in perimenopause. So if you're in perimenopause, you want to test between days 19 to 21 of your cycle. And if your cycle is regular. If your cycles are very irregular, the timing isn't critical or as critical, because the odds that you are ovulating are unlikely. However, you could do a ovulation predictor kit where you pee on a stick every morning and you see if you ovulate. And then if you ovulate, you test within 5 to 7 days after that. Okay. Now, blood work is one tool. How you feel matters most. I also use a Dutch test, which looks at urinary metabolites of your hormones and your methylation or detox of your hormones. Other providers use salivary tests to test tissue saturation of hormones. So it really depends. I'm going to review the full thyroid panel that you need. I know I reviewed it earlier, but let's go. TSH, free T3, free T4, reverse T3, thyroid antibodies, and ferritin. So why would we want all of this? Well, again, your thyroid function, it impacts your metabolism, your mood, your energy, and your weight, and your hair, and your skin. But B, you can have a normal TSH and still be struggling if you're not converting thyroid to its most active form, if that is impaired. And like I've seen some providers, they'll give women just straight up T3 if they're not converting. And that alone gives them their energy and their life back. So when it comes to functional ranges also and test interpretation, normal ranges are not the same as optimal. So like testosterone, a lab normal is 6 to 10, which is way too low. Optimal for women should be 40 to 70. And many of my clients even feel best when their testosterone is between 60 and 100. So that's why I always like working with a hormone literate provider, because that's a huge gap. And many women, again, are told they're fine when they're actually just running on fumes. I have a client, it's very interesting. She's in my group coaching. She's from Switzerland, and her doctor told her to take estrogen 3 times a week. What? And progesterone like 2 times a week. I was like, what kind of cockamamie doses are these? Like, this is crazy. And she was wondering why she was feeling so horrible and still hot flashing and not sleeping. Hormones are chemical messengers. We need them to deliver on the daily. So, but back to the lab. So remember, labs are important data. They help guide dosing and troubleshooting, but they also don't replace listening to your body. So always trust your symptoms over paper. Keep track of your symptoms when you start hormones. And as you ramp up, you may find you don't tolerate them all in the beginning, but then like 6 months into it, you feel great, or 2 months into it, you feel great, or you may find you don't see any results, but as you bump up your dose, you feel much better. So also check in with yourself and write down your symptoms, because it's hard to remember how you felt when you started versus 2 months later. Like everything gets lost in the shuffle. So make sure you're writing it down. One more point I want to touch upon is alcohol and midlife. So, ladies, this is one of the biggest reckonings in midlife. But alcohol really wrecks your sleep. It wrecks your REM sleep, slows down your thyroid function for 3 to 4 days after. It totally inflames the gut, and it really screws with your hormones. It keeps you estrogen dominant for 6 to 8 hours after every cocktail that you have. So many of us reach the point, and this is where I'm pretty much at, everyone, like it's either good sleep or a cocktail or a glass of wine, because my gut basically says piss off. Every time I drink, my sleep, I'm just up for hours while my liver's trying to detox it. So what I drink when I go out, I do love bitters and soda. It's called the Bits and Bubs for a digestive boost. My local bar is hilarious. Like they have literally brought me Jägermeister shots. They're like, it's a digestive. I'm like, I'll just sip it. Thank you. On vacations, I'll have an Aperol spritz, but that's really it for me these days. Like I can't even look at a martini. I feel like it will kill me. So that's where I am on alcohol. All right, question for you. I'm just bringing in all the Q's and A's. My gynecologist told me something weird, that all menopausal women's breasts get bigger. I've already got big ones. And he said, yep, that's just what happens. So yes, it's super annoying. And yes, I have a biggie and a small. So that's just how it is. But, and every morning I look in the mirror and I like lift mine up to where I want them to be. And then they fall back down, which is why I joke that they're my 32 longs now. And like my mom and I used to joke that we were going to pierce our nipples and then like put hook to chains and hook them in our earrings for a DIY lift. But we did not do that. So yes, your boobs may get a little bigger in midlife. They may get a little bigger in hormones, but with your hormones. But honestly, it's not so tremendous. You'll still fit in your bra. It just may be a little different. And again, risk to benefit. To me, it's a worthy trade-off. It's not ideal. I don't love it, but to me, it is a worthy trade-off. Okay, another question coming in hot. Does the menopause belly ever go away? I'm working out, I'm doing all the things, but is it here to stay? So the good news is no, it can definitely get better, but it takes a lot more time and it takes longer than it used to. And so whatever worked for you in your 30s, it's probably going to take 2 to 3 times as long now. It's a long game. And I tell my clients, those Instagram transformations you see are a good 6 to 12 to 24 months. These are not overnight changes at all. Okay, so we work on the big rocks first. We work on, getting your inflammation down, replenishing your hormones, consistent strength training. The waistline does return. You're not stuck like this forever. Question, if I lift weights regularly, but mostly body weight and not super heavy, is that going to be okay? Well, I'm going to tell you, heavier weights do make a big difference, and lifting heavy really helps improve muscle tone and boost metabolism and even reduce that breast heaviness we were talking about before, especially when we're eating optimal protein. It can really shift the body composition more effectively in menopause than lighter workouts. But a lot of women I see, again, have super rock bottom cortisol. They're very tired. They're not getting good sleep and have a lot more injuries or joint pain. So if you can't lift super heavy, that's okay too. Just increase your time under tension, do more reps. So time under tension is just slower reps, a count of 4 down, a count of 4 up. You can really work very hard just slowing down your repetition pace. At this point, I am going to put a pin in this discussion. There is so much more to discuss that we are going to do a part 2 episode. So you will stay tuned for that. But this is plenty for you all to digest. So I want you all to listen to this again and again, share it with everyone you know, follow this podcast so that it shows up on your weekly podcasts in your feed. And also really remember that you've got this. Knowledge is power. It took me a long time to learn all of this. You may be newbies to this, or it may reinforce what you already know. Feel free to listen and re-listen to this podcast at least 2 to 3 times because it takes time to digest and absorb everything. You can read my book, See You Later, Ovulator. That will reinforce everything we've talked about in this podcast today. So thank you so much for joining me, and I can't wait to hang with you again next week. If you loved this episode, follow or subscribe to the Midlife Realignment wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube, and leave a review to help other women find this show.